Thank you. I want to thank Film Geeks San Diego. I want to thank Beth Accomando. And I want to thank Digital Jim for making this 80th anniversary screening of My Darling Clementine. Awesome. Woo! So, where does My Darling Clementine come in the careers of Ford and Victor Mature? Well, when John Ford started filming My Darling Clementine on location in Monument Valley, he had been making films for about 35 years and had already won 3 Oscars for his feature films. My Darling Clementine was Ford's second film after serving in the Navy as head of the photographic unit for the Office of Strategic Services in World War II. And Ford was more fully established as an artist when he went into war. So he got to continue to exercise his craft by making his 7 wartime documentaries, including December 7th and the Battle of Midway. It was not the same situation for Victor Mature, who by 1946 had been making movies for a total of 4 years. He had yet to really establish himself in Hollywood. He had actually worked more in the theater than in pictures. He studied and performed at the Pasadena Playhouse for 4 years. He performed in plays by Maeterlinck and Shakespeare and Bernard Shaw and even Ben Hecht. And it was in a Ben Hecht play that he was discovered by Hal Roach Studios, where he made 4 light, entertaining films, including 1 Million Years BC, where he played Tumac the Caveman, which was one of the highest grossing films of the year. Yep. Victor went on to New York, to Broadway. This was so, in his words, so people would know he could do more than grunt and groan. And he received rave reviews for his role in Lady in the Dark, which had music by Kurt Weill and lyrics by Ira Gershwin, and the words were all written by Moss Hart. He then starred in von Sternberg's The Shanghai Gesture, and then in I Wake Up Screaming, which was arguably the first film noir at 20th Century Fox, and this is where Daryl Zanuck offered him his first contract at a major studio. So Victor Mature was on an upward trajectory, right? Then Pearl Harbor happened. The United States officially enters World War II in December 1941. And Victor went back to making light, frothy musical comedies. He enlisted in the Coast Guard, and then he was shipped off at the end of 1942. Victor Mature's 3 years of service in World War II included a 14-month deployment on the United States Coast Guard cutter Storis in the North Atlantic. He then spent nearly a year as MC of the Tars and Spars War Bond and Recruitment Show, which was not particularly creative, but crisscrossing America, making appearances, and raising millions of dollars for the war effort meant Victor Mature managed to stay somewhat in the public eye. But then he was off again on a transport ship, bound for the Atlantic and Pacific fronts for much of 1945. Right after Victor Mature's return from his 3 years of World War II service in the Coast Guard, he was set to make 3 Little Girls in Blue, another light, fluffy, romantic comedy. And as far as Hollywood was concerned, Victor Mature was still just a light and frothy actor whose biggest box office hit had been playing Tumac the Caveman. His Broadway triumph was all but forgotten after having spent 3 years at war. So both my dad and John Ford had very specific missions in mind when they came to make My Darling Clementine in 1946. My dad wanted to establish himself. He wanted to do some serious work. He wanted to take the next step to becoming a major star. Now John Ford, he had apparently been traumatized by what he witnessed at the Battle of Midway and in North Africa and on Omaha Beach. So he decided to rediscover Americana, the hope, the rebirth, the vast beauty, the limitless possibilities, and the potential that the wild frontier promised. Ford continued creating the Western American mythology, both for the American public post-war and for himself. So John Ford and Victor Mature are on a kind of mission. And in a strange way, that mission kind of links them together. And not so much, I don't know, the proof of that, but there are several things that give credence to this particular interpretation. One is what they mention in the 2007 Becoming Ford documentary about how the character of Doc Holliday incorporates many of John Ford's actual characteristics. Ford had a lot to do with the characterization of Doc Holliday. So, the Doc Holliday of My Darling Clementine is mercurial. He was self-destructive, an alcoholic. He didn't treat people very well. He was very tender with Chihuahua, though. And he defends Thorndike, the traveling actor. So Holliday was a very sophisticated man who hid his sophistication behind a mask of traditional masculinity. Becoming John Ford mentions that Ford was well known for always wearing a beat-up old fedora. He was always smoking his pipe. And then, for some reason, when he got particularly stressed and angry on the set, he would always chew on a handkerchief. So at the end of the scene at the OK Corral, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, at the end of the scene, Doc Holliday holds a white handkerchief, and for a moment, that handkerchief is the focal point of the entire screen. The point being that there are too many of these classic Ford personality quirks in this particular portrayal of Doc Holliday that Ford helped to create for people to ignore. Another thing is the memo from Darryl Zanuck to John Ford, dated January 8th, 1946, and this is from a book by Rudy Belmer. So, Dear Jack, I am pleased that you like Victor Mature. Personally, I think the guy has been one of the most underrated performers in Hollywood. The public is crazy about him. And strangely enough, every picture that he has been in has been a big box office hit. Yet the Romanoff Roundtable, a popular restaurant at the time frequented by motion picture executives and players, the Romanoff Roundtable has refused to take him seriously as an actor. A part like Doc Holliday will be sensational for him, as I know you will get a great performance out of him. And I agree with you that the peculiar traits of his personality are ideal for a characterization such as this. So it's great to hear the head of 20th Century Fox, Darryl Zanuck, championing my dad to John Ford. My final example of this sort of unique bond between John Ford and my dad is the fact that John Ford takes my dad to recuperate when he's ill. So now, during the filming of My Darling Clementine, my dad got really sick with bronchitis, which was ironic because in the film, his character has tuberculosis and is coughing all over the place. So Victor was so sick that Ford insisted on driving him back home from Monument Valley all the way to Hollywood, back to where he was living. But at this point, it was kind of early on in 1946, and my dad had just finished his service in the Coast Guard at the end of November in 1945. So he hadn't really found a place to live yet. Well, the place he had, the car he had, the dog he had, all the stuff he had before he left for the war, all those disappeared because he was living with Rita Hayworth before he went to the war. And when he came back, Rita Hayworth was married to Orson Welles, and all of my dad's stuff was gone. So Ford quickly discovered that Victor had been living in his dressing room at 20th Century Fox. And Ford did not think that this was appropriate. So Ford insisted that Victor come back to Monument Valley and stay in his house so he would be looked after properly. So Ford became a kind of Ma Joad straight out of The Grapes of Wrath. It was during this period of living and working together on My Darling Clementine that Ford asked my dad to be part of his company. And he also wanted Victor to date his daughter. My dad, being the savvy guy that he was, he knew that dating the daughter of John Ford could end up being very problematic. So Victor also saw the way Ford treated the people around him. Surprisingly, my dad did not receive much of Ford's infamous abuse, perhaps because Victor had spent those 14 months aboard the Coast Guard cutter in the North Atlantic, and John Ford respected him for it. or perhaps because Ford wanted to use Victor for future projects and he didn't want to scare him away. Another factor was, well, my dad was known to enjoy a good stiff drink or 2 or 3 or 4. But he quickly realized on the set that he was not on par with Ford and his stock company. They were Olympic level drinkers. So for all these reasons, and probably more, my dad ultimately and very respectfully declined Ford's offer. Now, so before I close, I'd like to take a look at the most beloved character in My Darling Clementine, well, besides Victor Mature, of course. So this character has one of the funniest lines in the film, and it's kind of like a throwaway. Henry Fonda walks into the saloon, he bellies up to the bar, he looks at the bartender, and he says, "Mac, you ever been in love?" And Mac replies, "No, I've been a barman all my life." And when he says it, you believe it. You believe he's lived in that bar all his life. But this is a testament to Ford's love of faces, his love and professional appreciation of character actors. This is why he kept these faces, these actors in his stock company from the silent era right on into the 1960s. So you believe Mac has been a bartender all his life, but in reality, Mac the bartender is J. Farrell McDonald, who graduated from Yale University. He directed over 50 short and feature-length silent films in the 19-teens. He gave Hal Roach and Harold Lloyd some of their first film roles, like when they played uncredited, bearded Philistines in his 1914 epic Samson, based, of course, on the biblical story of Samson and Delilah. So this is very prophetic, considering my dad would make his first films with Hal Roach Studios in 1939 and 40, and would finally be catapulted to movie stardom, playing one of the title roles in Cecil B. DeMille's comeback epic Samson and Delilah in 1949. But back to Mac. Farrell directed The Patchwork Girl from Oz in 1918, which was the only successful film project to come out of L. Frank Baum's production company. And Hal Roach appeared as the uncredited Cowardly Lion. So from the 1920s on, Mac worked steadily as a character actor, showing up in Fox Film Corporation's epic Murnau's Sunrise in 1927, and in my dad's first film, The Housekeeper's Daughter, at Hal Roach Studios, playing the uncredited police captain. He also played uncredited street vendor, uncredited junk man, uncredited bank guard, of course, Mac the barman, and my personal favorite, uncredited man whose great-grandfather planted tree in It's a Wonderful Life, also from 1946. So L. Farrell McDonald would appear in something like 25 Ford films from both the silent and the talking eras. I find it interesting, though, that Mac the bartender is no more Mac the bartender than My Darling Clementine is a true history of the shootout at the OK Corral, or of Wyatt Earp, or of Doc Holliday. Neither is the book, Frontier Marshal, that the story came from. Neither are the 2 movies of the same title that were based on the book. Neither was the story Wyatt Earp told to John Ford. Even John Ford is really John Martin Feeney. The fence posts in Tombstone are only that beautiful because noir cinematographer Joe McDonald lit them that way. It's all myth. It's legend. It's like that frequently misquoted line from Ford's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This is the West. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. So, and that's what Ford did. So enjoy it. Enjoy the legend. And just before I finish, it would be my dad's birthday on January 29th, his 113th birthday. Yes, and I was wondering if we could all, in honor of his birthday, sing My Darling Clementine together.
Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling.